Okay, here's the last video on portraits. And I want to go over a few things that you do to get to the point where you feel like you can see it coming together. You can see yourself uh, really getting near the end. It's getting to the point where you're happy with it. And how do you finish this thing off? I know I've given you a lot, which is why we haven't turned anything in the last few class periods, and I just wanted you to focus on practicing this, working through it. We started with the oval. We drew an egg-shaped oval. Then we added our guidelines here, here, midline, where the eyes go. Then right above that, the eyebrow line. And then the nose line was halfway between the eyebrow and the chin. And that is how you get things set up. Then we had you practice a full day just drawing the facial features: eyes, nose, mouth, eyebrows. And then we didn't really get too much into ears, but then I showed you that in the following day. Okay. Then, after we had drawn out our oval and our guidelines and practiced the facial features, then in our last lesson, you were to have started to add those facial features to the face. And remember that I had you start with the nose, because at this intersection point, we know that's where we can begin. And then you have to refer to your drawing, your image on a regular basis to see, is this nose right for my person, or is it a much skinnier nose, or maybe it's even wider than that? Those are things that you as the artist just have to work through. So we did the nose up to the eyebrows. Then we added the eyes. Remember what I said about the eyes, where you start on either side of the nose, then that distance there equals the width of your eye. So in other words, what you end up having is 1, 2, and 3 equidistant areas. This helps you avoid having an eye that's this big or way out here. And it can be tricky. So these guidelines and these tricks I'm showing you are very helpful. Okay? Once you've got that done, then we had you go and add your mouth. And it begins obviously below the nose. And I drew the line and then added the mouth. And it should be wider than the nose. So if my nose is here and here, it should be wider than that. Okay? The ears we went over as well. They are just below this eyebrow line and just above the nose line. Make sure you extend them so that they're not, as I showed you in the last video, little ears like that. They're a little longer than you think they are, is my experience with students. That's an easy thing to get crossed up on. Okay, so now, assuming you've got your pieces in place, I want to go over a few things. First of all, placement, making sure things are in the right place. Secondly, proportion, meaning they're the right size. And so I just talked about that, making sure your eyes are about the right size for where it's going. Your nose is the right length. Your eyes are in the middle of that oval. Your ears fall between the eyebrow and nose line. Okay, so those are all things you can adjust. As far as adjustments go, that is a big part of what you're going to be doing today. Right now, I can already see this lip here. This upper lip is off compared to this one. I think it would be a little bit more like this. So it's all about making those adjustments, okay? Making those adjustments. And you have to refer to your image that you're drawing off of and make those determinations. A lot of faces you'll have visible markings like the indents of the cheekbone. You can make a relatively neutral face, smile a little bit, real easily, rather than a big smile like that, sometimes you can just kind of go like that. And suddenly it's grinning back at you a little bit. And your eyes here, that looks good. You kind of make sure that eyelid is over there. And then as you go and get satisfied with things, have your trusty eraser, and I don't need that line anymore if I'm happy with the eyes and where they are. I don't need a lot of these guidelines. And you can start eliminating those things as you go. All right? Don't get frustrated if it doesn't look like the subject of your portrait right away. I'm not looking for exact replicas, photographic representations, but I want you to take it as far as you think you can and push yourself to do a nice job on that. We talked about hair a little bit in the last video, and I'm doing straight hair, but if it calls for different hair, then use that. Like, let's say it's curly hair. Well, you have to just kind of draw curly hair, and it's more circular, and it's more like that, more rounded, and you can change that hair. Okay, so that is something that you'll just have to give a shot at and practice and get comfortable with. So now I've got someone with curly hair on one side and straight hair on the other. By the way, if you picked up an art kit, you probably have one of these nice soft lead drawing pencils. These are great for darker pencil marks and for shading, which I'm going to show you in a second. So you can start filling in those areas here. Okay. All right. So you can see it coming together. I'm starting to get rid of the guidelines that I don't need when I'm happy with an area. And then the last thing I want to talk to you about is shading and or coloring. Okay, so if you're working off of a photograph, and remember I was working on an image of AOC, and I am this far with that. Okay, I'm not happy with it. What I realized is there are some flaws in it. I think her nose is too long. If you look at the photograph, and then you look at my representation, I think I regret this because otherwise I think it's pretty good. But I think that the nose should be just about a little bit shorter, and her whole face could be brought in a little bit. But overall, it's fine. With your shading pencil, I can look at my photograph and start shading. Now you can see where it's lighter on this side of her face, and this side's more in shadow. So you can take your pencil and kind of shade in those areas. Right up here on the photograph, it's a little bit darker. There's just kind of a darker area that isn't getting as much light. And that goes throughout this side of her face. So I'm kind of working my way down, referring to my photograph and adding that shading. Notice I'm turning my pencil sideways. If you just have a regular pencil, that's fine too. And you can do the same thing. In fact, in some cases, I like this better. It erases easier, it smudges easier, just a regular number 2 pencil. Gives you a little more control. This is much darker and a little bit harder to work with. Use what you think works best for you. Okay, so you can see that shadow there. Notice the shadow I put in here on this side of her nose. In the photograph it shows that's a pretty dark shadow along here. And you can see the dimples and the dark and light areas in her face. Take that as far as you can, but don't let it overtake what you're doing and become too much of a preoccupation. But you can see I've done some of that shading. Turn your pencil sideways, and I'm not even pushing down barely at all. I'm just kind of slowly adding the pencil where I think it needs to go. If there's a darker area, like her ear right here, under the fold of her ear, then I just push down really hard and get that in there. And then it gradually gets lighter and lighter, and then I'm barely pushing down again. So play around with shading. If you're using colored pencils or some other way of colorizing it, then you're welcome to do that. I won't go over that in this video because a lot of you, I think, are just going to do pencil portraits. If you want to add color, I think that's great, and just go for it. And with colored pencils, you use them much the same way I just showed you how you use this pencil. Okay, enough. Let's have you work on these. Get to the point where you are happy with that drawing. What did I have? Another one here. Work on it, develop it, and then obviously our last step, when you're happy with it and you're done, take a picture and post it to Seesaw. Looking forward to seeing what you come up with, and message me via Schoology if you have any questions. Good luck, have fun, and we'll be in touch soon.